once known as Jimmy, and Craig as well. Craig's original name was Glenn and was Jimmy's childhood friend. He was an excellent student in high school, but he became a brilliant geneticist, and he turned into a kind of a benevolent version of a mad scientist when he devises a plan to rid the Earth of Homo sapiens and replace their destructive, poorly designed species with a more peaceful and environmentally friendly version of Homo sapiens. So it's a very, very interesting idea, and the third character surrounding this is Oryx, a mysterious woman recognised by Jimmy and Craig as a waif-like girl from a child pornography site. It's a very unusual story, and how they all weft together is very interesting. But the actual story in the world that they both come from, in the first part, a world that is corporately driven, that is environmentally bankrupt, and in the second part, a world in which humankind is gone, absolutely decimated, and all that's really left behind are the Quakers, the new human species. So it's an interesting idea, but environmentalism is at the heart of this story, and we're going to have a little bit from the woman herself, Margaret Atwood, on the future and environmentalism, and just a little bit from her.
So I write about something called the future, which is a wonderful thing to write about because nobody can fact check it. But I try to base my futures on realities that are with us today. So I'm not writing about planet X. I'm not writing about a galaxy far, far away. I'm writing about this Earth in the near future. And everything that I put in has a basis in reality. Something we're doing now, something we've already done, something we're thinking of doing.
So you write about possible futures?
I write about probable futures. Possible and probable.
How do you think we could change the world?
We have already changed the world a lot, not always for the better. Some of it's for the better, as far as we human beings are concerned. But every time we invent a new technology, we like to play with that technology, and we don't always foresee the consequences. And every time we change the source of our energy, we change our whole society and our whole set of values, by which I mean that amongst hunter-gatherers there was one set of values, amongst agriculturalists there was another set of values, amongst carbon-based fuel people, which we are at the moment, cheap energy, there's another set of values, and we will now have to develop a fourth because we could not continue burning carbon fuels at the rate we have been burning them without killing ourselves.
So do you see technology as a curse or a blessing?
It's always a double-edged sword. Cuts both ways. You can't say it's a curse or a blessing. You have to look at each piece of technology, see what it accomplishes on the positive side, and then what the side effects are on the negative side. For instance, our ability to discover and invent has allowed us to open the biggest Pandora's box in the world, which is the ability to create new biological species. That can be a good thing, better potatoes. It can be a bad thing, more destructive microbes. So you can't say good or bad without saying specifically what. The most important thing for the world as a whole is to maintain the oxygen level that allows us to live on land. And how are you going to do that? Well, first of all, you'll have to avoid killing off the ocean because the blue-green algae in the ocean produces 60 to 80% of the oxygen that we breathe. And the oxygen that we breathe was created by the blue-green algae 1.9 billion years ago. Before that, we didn't have oxygen in the air. So I'd say, for the world as a whole, that would be number one priority. And then we can talk about the rest, as long as we know that we're still going to be alive and that other life forms on the planet will be alive too.
Atwood would be much higher on my list personally, but I'm sure in decades to come she will be placed much higher. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we have to take into account two of the greatest dystopian novels ever written. Number 2, we have Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. It was written in 1931, but its concepts are unbelievable. They're unbelievable foreseeing. Reproductive technology, sleep learning, psychological manipulation, classic conditioning. It's all part of it, and it's an incredible story. He wrote Brave New World as a kind of a warning to people about what may happen, and it's a terrifying idea. The novel opens in London in the year AF 632, which is 2540 by our calendar, and it describes a society illuminated by the activities of two of the novel's central characters, Lenina Crown and Bernard Marx, and the other characters whom they come in contact with. Lenina is a hatchery worker. She is socially accepted and contented, but Bernard is a psychologist in the Directorate of Hatcheries and Conditioning, and he isn't. He is shorter in stature than the average of his alpha caste, a quality shared by the lower caste, which gives him an inferiority complex. His intelligence and his work with hypnopedia allow him to understand and disapprove of the methods by which society is sustained. Courting disaster, he's vocal and arrogant about his differences. Bernard is mocked by the other alphas because of his stature as well as his individualistic tendencies, and is threatened with exile to Iceland because of his non-conformity. His only friend is Helmut Watson, a lecturer in the College of Emotional Engineering. The friendship is based on their feelings of being misfits in the world state. But unlike Bernard, Watson's feeling of alienation stems from being exceptionally gifted, intelligent, handsome and physically strong. Helmholtz is drawn to Bernard as a confidant. It's an interesting book. It's very well worth a read, and we're going to have a little bit about Aldous Huxley from his own words on what he fears for the future, and we must keep this into account as well for our own imminent future. Aldous Huxley talking about what he regards as techno-dictators.
It's a question of education, to teach people to be on their guard against the sort of verbal booby traps into which they're always being led, to analyze the kind of things that are said to them. I think it's terribly important to insist on individual values, that every human being is unique. And it is, of course, on this genetical basis that the whole idea of the value of freedom is based.
This is Aldous Huxley, a man haunted by a vision of hell on earth. Mr. Huxley wrote Brave New World, a novel that predicted that someday the entire world would live under a frightful dictatorship. Today, Mr. Huxley says that his fictional world of horror is probably just around the corner for all of us.
There are a number of impersonal forces which are pushing in the direction of less and less freedom. The first of them can be called overpopulation. The whole essence of biological life on Earth is a question of balance, and what we have done is to practice death control in a most intensive manner without balancing this with birth control at the other end. In the underdeveloped countries, people have less to eat and less goods, and the central government has to take over more and more responsibility for keeping the ship of state on an even keel. And then, of course, you're likely to get social unrest under such conditions, with again an intervention of the central government. One sees here a pattern which seems to be pushing very strongly towards a totalitarian regime.
Are there specific devices or methods of communication which diminish our freedoms?
Well, there are certainly devices which can be used in this way. Hitler used terror on the one kind, brute force on the one hand, but he also used a very efficient form of propaganda. He had the radio, which he used to the fullest extent, and was able to impose his will on an immense mass of people. I mean, the Germans were a highly educated people. We mustn't be caught by surprise by our own advancing technology. This has happened again and again in history. And suddenly people have found themselves in a situation which they didn't foresee and doing all sorts of things they didn't really want to do. At present, the television, I think, is being used quite harmlessly. But, I mean, imagine, which must be the situation in all communist countries, where the television, where it exists, is always saying the same thing the whole time, is always driving along. It's drumming in of a single idea all the time. It's obviously an immensely powerful instrument. All technology is in itself morally neutral. These are just powers which can either be used well or ill. It's the same thing with atomic energy. We can either use it to blow ourselves up, or we can use it as a substitute for the coal and the oil which are running out. In this book of mine, Brave New World, I postulated a substance called soma, which was a very versatile drug. It would make people feel happy in small doses, make them see visions in medium doses, and it would send them to sleep in large doses. I think it's quite on the cards that we may have drugs which will profoundly change our mental states without doing us any harm. Well, what is going to happen in the future is the dictators will find, as the old saying goes, that you can do everything with bayonets except sit on them. That if you want to preserve your power indefinitely, you have to get the consent of the ruled. And this they will do partly by drugs, partly by these new techniques of propaganda. They will do it by bypassing the sort of rational side of man and appealing to his subconscious and his deeper emotions, making him actually love his slavery. I mean, I think this is the danger, that actually people may be in some ways happy under the new regime, but they will be happy in a situation where they oughtn't to be happy.
Writing about American political campaigns, you say all that is needed is money and a candidate who can be coached to look sincere.
Well, this is this idea that the candidates had to be merchandised as though they wear soap or toothpaste, and that you had to depend entirely on the personality. I mean, the personality is important, but there are certainly people with an extremely amiable personality, particularly on TV, who might not necessarily be very good in positions of political trust. I mean, what does a democracy depend on? A democracy depends on the individual voter making an intelligent and rational choice for what he regards as his enlightened self-interest in any given circumstance. But what these people are doing is to try to bypass the rational side of man and to appeal directly to these unconscious forces below the surface, so that you are, in a way, making nonsense of the whole democratic procedure, which is based on conscious choice on rational grounds. I must say I still believe in democracy. If we can make the best of the creative activities of the people on top, plus those of the people on the bottom, so much the better.
Mr. Huxley, I surely thank you for spending this half hour with us, and I wish you Godspeed, sir.
Thank you.
That was a clip by Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World, who made it to number 2 in our top 10 dystopic stories. We're just going to, before we go to number 1, go over the 10 of them. We had number 10, The Hunger Games, which is a very modern tale of a dystopic future of different areas where they use a particular type of game to enforce social order, where people have to survive and fight against each other. In at number 9 was The City of Bohane, which is an Irish dystopian novel which is set in a fictional Western Irish city of Bohane in the year 2053, and it's about gang warfare there. In at number 9 was P.D. James's Children of Men, set in a future where this is the last generation and there is no fertility whatsoever, when suddenly a woman gives birth. In at number 7 was The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, a story once again of infertility due to pollution and environmental disasters and sexually transmitted diseases, where women who do have fertility are forced to become breeder slaves to the upper class male leaders and their wives. After that, at number 5, we had Fahrenheit 451. Sorry, number 6, we had Fahrenheit 451, about the future where books are banned, and Fahrenheit 451 is the temperature at which firemen put books out by incinerating them. In at number 5, we had The Wind-Up Girl,